Most people spend their entire lives waiting for something to happen to them before they change. They wait for inspiration, they wait for bravery, they wait for the perfect opening, they wait for fear to vanish, they wait for life to get easier. But those who cross the invisible frontier from the common life to the extraordinary life uncover a truth Napoleon Hill embedded in every principle he taught. Change does not occur when the world shifts. It occurs when you impose order upon yourself. Discipline is the keystone between your deepest desire and your tangible reality. It is the scaffolding that aligns thought, choice, and deed. It is the silent alchemy that transmutes potential into destiny. And this is precisely why so few wield it. Discipline does not please the ego, it does not soothe pride, it does not cater to fleeting emotions. Discipline is unyielding, clinical, unambiguous. It does not negotiate with excuses, it does not bend to lethargy. It does not wait for you to feel inspired or ready. Discipline demands that you execute what is necessary, irrespective of what you feel. It is the force that forges relentless men and women, while its absence keeps millions imprisoned in lives they never truly intended to live. The common life is steered by impulse. The extraordinary life is navigated by definite chief aim. The common life operates on mood. The extraordinary life operates on conviction. The common life starts and quits. The extraordinary life starts and persists. And when you examine the biography of any monumental figure, Marie Curie laboring in obscurity, Steve Jobs ousted before returning to revolutionize, Lincoln forged in perpetual defeat, J.K. Rowling rejected and nearly destitute before defining a generation, you will always find a common denominator: daily, non-negotiable, uninterrupted discipline. The world admires outcomes, but rarely comprehends the machinery that produces them. Extraordinary success is not born from talent, not from intellect, not from luck, connections, privilege, or divine inspiration. These elements can assist, but none substitute for discipline, because talent without discipline is squandered potential. Intellect without discipline is knowledge without execution. Dreams without discipline are merely lazy fantasies. Discipline is the element that converts possibility into reality with mathematical precision. But there is something deeper still. Discipline is a spiritual decision before it is a practical behavior. It is the internal declaration, I refuse to exist below my capacity. It is the understanding that your life will not improve while you continue to tolerate small habits, elaborate excuses, and patterns that chain you to what you swore to overcome. It is the rupture with the comfortable illusion that wanting is enough, because desire without discipline is self-deception.
And thus the true frontier is born. The frontier between who you are and who you could be, between inherited fate and chosen destiny, between living by reaction and living by construction. This frontier is not out there. It exists in the moment you choose to act when you lack the urge, in the instant you adhere to the plan despite exhaustion, in the pre-dawn silence when no one is watching, in the tedious repetition, the relentless effort, the unapplauded constancy. Here lies the truth that separates the extraordinary. Discipline is not punishment. Discipline is liberation. Freedom from being enslaved by your own impulses. Freedom from dependency on motivation. Freedom to construct a life few can envision. Freedom to leave a legacy that outlives your name. The common person calls discipline a sacrifice. The extraordinary person calls it an investment. The common person sees effort as pain. The extraordinary person sees effort as a portal. The common person flees discomfort. The extraordinary person pursues it, knowing that within it lies the growth nobody wants, and therefore the success few attain. Hill taught that discipline begins with the mastery of thought, which is why so few travel far. Most attempt to discipline the body without disciplining the mind, attempt to discipline the routine without disciplining belief, attempt to discipline the life without disciplining the internal dialogue. But the undisciplined mind sabotages any plan. It interrupts, procrastinates, invents convincing justifications, crafts emotional narratives that feel true but are merely protection mechanisms for your former self. That former self that fears growth because growth demands abandoning who you were. The extraordinary life is not born from comfort, it is born from rupture. Curie did not discover radium because she was a genius. She discovered because she was disciplined enough to persist beyond exhaustion. Jobs did not build an empire because he was lucky. He built because he was disciplined enough to learn continuously, adapt, and never retreat. Ford did not create new worlds from inspiration. He created because he was disciplined enough to transform every rejection into fuel, every failure into refinement, every obstacle into narrative. Discipline is the DNA of the extraordinary. And the extraordinary is not born from great leaps. It is born from small acts repeated infinitely. The humble, silent, seemingly insignificant repetition is the invisible brick of all notable success. Observers see the final monument but ignore the bricks. Discipline is the act of laying one brick per day, especially on the days you loathe the task. There is a powerful detail. Discipline is not infinite resistance, it is a daily decision. You do not need to be indestructible, you only need to be consistent. You must win today, then win tomorrow, then win the next day. Discipline does not demand perfection, it demands continuity. You do not lose because you fall, you lose because you do not rise the next day.
When you finally understand discipline as a natural extension of your purpose and not as a penalty, something within you shifts. The routine ceases to be an enemy, effort ceases to be burdensome, fatigue ceases to be an obstacle, time ceases to be a threat, the mind ceases to be chaos, and you begin to operate on a new frequency, one where you become reliable to yourself. And when a person becomes reliable to themselves, they become dangerous. Dangerous to mediocrity, dangerous to excuses, dangerous to their own past. Because discipline produces self-confidence, self-confidence produces courage, courage produces action, action produces results, results produce identity, identity produces destiny. It all begins with the smallest act of discipline, repeated until it becomes who you are. Here, the frontier becomes clear as never before. The common act when it is easy, the extraordinary act because it is necessary. The common depend on motivation, the extraordinary depend on commitment. The common live in cycles, the extraordinary live in constancy. The common focus on the now, the extraordinary focus on the legacy. And this choice, this simple choice, changes absolutely everything. Discipline begins when you realize no one is coming to save you. No mentor can replace your effort. No opportunity can compensate for your lack of constancy. No motivation can sustain you if your mind still seeks shortcuts. Discipline is the voluntary renunciation of the excuses you created to protect your weaknesses. It is the moment you look in the mirror and acknowledge, I can be more than I have been. It is a silent, non-negotiable, non-transferable internal pact between you and the greatness demanding to be born within you. And yet, most quit before they start because they believe discipline is a prison. This is the great deception. Discipline is not a cell, it is the key. It frees you from impulsivity, from instability, from a life led by the feelings of the moment. The undisciplined person is a slave to their own mood. The disciplined person is the master of their own destiny. Napoleon Hill wrote, "Self-discipline begins with the mastery of your thoughts." This is why so few attain what they truly desire, because they want to control the world but refuse to control themselves. They want extraordinary results but continue to treat their mind like abandoned ground. They want freedom but reject the only force that can build it. Internal discipline transforms everything. It defines what you tolerate, what you focus on, what you value, what you abandon. It recalibrates your identity. You cease to be someone driven by impulses and become someone driven by purpose. You cease to be someone who reacts and become someone who creates. You cease to be someone adrift and transform into someone who plants each step of your future with intention. This is why discipline will always be the frontier. It is the invisible line separating the dreamer from the achiever, the attempter from the conqueror, the wisher from the builder, the one who lives in the improvisation of a common life from the one who sculpts an extraordinary life. Discipline is not glamorous, not pretty, not cinematic while it happens. Curie did not isolate radium in a flash of inspiration. She repeated, until she transformed failure into foundation. Carnegie did not erect empires because he was brilliant, but because he was tireless. Henry Ford did not defy the impossible because he was enlightened, but because he refused to negotiate his vision with small thinkers. Walt Disney did not become Disney by magic, but because he ignored every closed door with a conviction only the disciplined possess. No one brilliant shines by accident. There is always a routine behind the glory, a pattern behind the luck, a discipline behind the talent. This is where many become confused. They believe discipline is about willpower, but willpower is unstable. It rises and falls with the winds of emotion. Discipline, on the other hand, is structure, system, strategic construction. It is the decision to remove improvisation from your life and replace it with habits that propel you toward your objective, even on days you lack energy, desire, or motivation. Discipline is what transforms a goal into an inevitability, because when you are disciplined, the process becomes so solid that results cease to be a question of if and merely become a question of when. And discipline demands sacrifice. It always will. The price of the extraordinary is paid in silence. It is paid when you rise earlier while others sleep. It is paid when you continue training while others quit. It is paid when you work on a Saturday instead of being distracted by the world. It is paid when you choose to study while others seek entertainment. It is paid when you say no to immediate pleasures because you have visualized the power of future gains. Indiscipline shouts, "I want everything now, even if it costs everything later." Discipline whispers. It invites you to something greater, even if it requires renunciation today. You must decide which voice to believe. The undisciplined live in cycles of regret. The disciplined live in cycles of growth. The undisciplined live blaming the past. The disciplined live building the future. The undisciplined live chasing motivation. The disciplined live creating momentum. The undisciplined fear failing. The disciplined fear stopping. The undisciplined dream of freedom. The disciplined conquer it. Because discipline is freedom. This is what few understand. Discipline is mastery over time, body, mind, attention, destiny. It is the force that transforms cause into order, desire into action, action into result. And no matter where you are now, you can discipline yourself. No matter how many internal promises you have broken, you can rebuild them. No matter how many failed attempts you have accumulated, you can restart today with more power than before.
Because discipline does not demand perfection, it demands consistency, presence, the courage to continue when many stop. And you only need one decision to cross the frontier, to cross the invisible line separating the person you were until yesterday from the person you know you can be tomorrow. This crossing does not happen with grand gestures. It happens with small daily victories, with simple habits, repeated, fortified, practiced until they become part of your mental DNA. You do not need a revolution. You need direction. You need intention. You need to create the routine that will mold the life you cannot yet fully visualize, but whose existence you already sense. This is how common people become extraordinary. They build a discipline so profound that life cannot ignore them. Discipline is not only what you do, it is what you tolerate within yourself. It is how you respond to the internal impulses that try to pull you back to a common life. Because believe me, the common life does not need to pursue you. It only needs to wait for you to yield to yourself. Most people fail not from lack of talent, but because they negotiate with their own impulses. They allow small concessions to become great surrenders. And Napoleon Hill stated clearly, indecision crystallizes into doubt, and doubt transforms into fear. The combination of these three is sufficient to destroy any chance of success. This is the truth. The bridge to the extraordinary life always collapses from the small cracks you tolerate in your character. This is why discipline is the highest form of self-respect. You prove yourself worthy of the extraordinary life when you demonstrate in practice that you are unwilling to be enslaved by your weaknesses. Because everyone has weaknesses, everyone has the desire to procrastinate, everyone has the urge to quit. The difference is simple, brutal, and non-negotiable. Extraordinary people do not obey their weaknesses. They observe them but do not follow them. They acknowledge them but do not kneel before them. They know discipline is not about feeling like it. It is about doing it despite not feeling like it. This is the force that transforms ordinary humans into giants. And when you truly understand this, you perceive that discipline is not punishment, it is emancipation. It frees you from emotional slavery, internal chaos, a life lived on autopilot. It frees you from the prison of self-sabotage, frees you from the constant sensation of betraying yourself. How many times have you laid your head on the pillow knowing you could have done more but didn't? How many times have you allowed a not now to become a not today and then a not this week until it finally becomes a never? How many opportunities have you lost simply because you didn't want to face the discomfort in that moment? Discipline is the antidote to that version of you that always manufactures justifications. The extraordinary life begins exactly at the point where you stop negotiating with yourself. When you look at discomfort and decide to walk through it. When you look at laziness and decide not to obey it. When you look at doubt and decide to act anyway. This is the type of behavior that builds extraordinary destinies. Edison did not have the motivation to fail 10,000 times. He had the discipline to continue. Rockefeller did not have the desire to face crises and economic wars. He had disciplined conviction. Lincoln did not have the energy to endure every personal tragedy he lived. He had internal fortitude. The greats have always operated on the frontier between the impossible and the inevitable. And this frontier only exists where there is discipline, not talent, not luck, discipline. The more you train discipline, the more you perceive that it molds not only your results, but your identity. Because deep down, everything we do is, first and foremost, a declaration of who we believe we are. Common people live saying, I can't. Extraordinary people live saying, I can't yet, but I will learn. Common people wait for motivation. Extraordinary people create momentum. Common people wait for perfect conditions. Extraordinary people make the best with the conditions they have. This is discipline, and discipline generates identity. Identity generates pattern. Pattern generates destiny. Discipline is the ultimate proof that you are capable of becoming someone reliable to yourself. And here is where the real magic happens. When you perceive that you can trust yourself, everything changes. You no longer need external recognition, validation, or for someone to believe in your potential. You become self-sufficient, self-generated, self-directed. You become the internal source of your own power. And when you reach this level, you become dangerous. Dangerous to any excuse, dangerous to any fear, dangerous to any limit, because nothing in the world is stronger than a person who has learned to command themselves.
Learning to command yourself means liberating yourself from the tyranny of momentary feelings. Discipline does not ignore emotions, it transcends them. And as you deepen into this territory where discipline ceases to be an obligation and becomes a pattern of identity, something extraordinary begins to happen within you. Your mind finally understands that there is no true freedom without structure. People think discipline imprisons, but the opposite is true. The common life is the true prison, where every decision is governed by impulses, moods, distractions, and insecurities. The extraordinary life is only born when you decide that you will be the author of your own behavior and not the result of it. To discipline yourself is to reclaim the internal government you lost over the years. Every notification that diverted you, every broken promise, every day started without direction, every objective postponed to someday when I have time.
Discipline destroys this illusion. It returns sovereignty to you. It puts you back in the driver's seat of your own existence. And when a person perceives they can trust themselves again, they become unstoppable. Because discipline is not just about doing, it is about proving to yourself that you fulfill what you say, that your word is not wind, that your identity is solid, that you are someone whose mind works for you and not against you. This is why extraordinary people carry a different aura. They possess the internal security of those who execute what they decide. They do not live justifying, negotiating with their goals, or putting out emotional fires because they already know in which direction they are heading. Discipline creates this internal axis, this psychological backbone, this mental structure that prevents you from being broken by circumstances. At this point, you begin to understand why so many great historical figures speak of discipline as if speaking of oxygen. Think of Carnegie, rising daily before the sun to learn what no one taught. Think of Edison working entire nights, repeating experiments the world called failures while he called them progress. Think of Henry Ford, ignoring the opinion of contemporary experts who said producing a V8 engine was impossible. Think of Benjamin Franklin, constructing one of the most detailed personal systems of discipline in history, measuring vices, virtues, failures, and advances as one sculpting a masterpiece. Think of Theodore Roosevelt, rising before all, training before all, preparing for each mental battle as if it were the final war. They were not superhuman, they simply decided to live above instinct. While the world lived on impulse, they lived on purpose. While the majority lived in emotional chaos, they lived in rational clarity. While some waited for motivation to act, they acted until motivation arose. This is what differentiates the common life from the extraordinary life. The common wait to feel, the extraordinary simply do. And when you do what needs to be done day after day, something transcendental occurs. Your brain changes, it adapts, it understands you are no longer there to be commanded. It learns to obey, it aligns with your purpose. Modern neuroscience confirms what the great geniuses always knew intuitively. Disciplined repetition creates new mental pathways. You literally chisel your brain to correspond to the life you wish to build. Every disciplined habit you create is a brick placed in the structure of your new identity, and identity is destiny. This is why there is no true discipline without vision. Discipline is the arm, vision is the mind. One needs the other. Without vision, discipline becomes suffering. Without discipline, vision becomes fantasy. When the two unite, you enter that rare state where your life ceases to be a series of attempts and transforms into an inevitable progression. It is when you stop thinking if you will succeed and start thinking when. It is when doubt ceases to be an obstacle and becomes fuel. It is when you realize you are not competing with anyone because no one is willing to pay the price you pay daily behind the scenes. Here is the raw truth.
Discipline is the only path through the boredom, through the discomfort, through the silence, through the slowness, through the part of the process the majority does not want to face. The common life dies at the door of discomfort. The extraordinary life begins exactly there. It is in the chapter where nothing seems to change that you prove who you are. It is in the chapter where no one is watching that you prove how much you want it. It is in the chapter where the desire to quit is greater than the visible progress that you deserve the next level. And when you traverse these psychological phases, the phase of resistance, laziness, self-sabotage, anxiety, perfectionism, inconstancy, you do not emerge merely stronger, you emerge transformed. You become the person who can sustain the life you desire, because there is no lasting victory without structural discipline. There is no sustainable abundance without consistent behavior. There is no real greatness without self-control. This is precisely why, to achieve an extraordinary life, you do not need to be more intelligent, more talented, more privileged, or more lucky. You need to be more disciplined. You need to become the type of person who acts when it is hard, remains when it is tiresome, continues when no one is watching. This creates an internal power that cannot be bought, taught, or borrowed. It can only be built, one disciplined day at a time.
And when you cross this frontier, when discipline ceases to be a weight and becomes a privilege, something extraordinary happens. Life begins to respond to you with the same intensity with which you respond to it. Each disciplined action creates a proportional reaction. Each conscious habit creates an inevitable outcome. Each firm choice builds an identity that can no longer be overthrown by excuses, fatigue, or distraction. At this point, you finally understand the essence of what Napoleon Hill always taught. Discipline is not the path to freedom. It is freedom itself. Because the undisciplined are slaves to impulse. The disciplined are masters of their own destiny. The undisciplined live reacting to the world. The disciplined create their own world. The undisciplined survive. The disciplined build. The undisciplined try. The disciplined do. The undisciplined wait for motivation. The disciplined generate movement. The undisciplined seek shortcuts. The disciplined master the process. The undisciplined have intentions. The disciplined have results. There comes a moment when you realize that everything that seemed difficult, waking early, focusing, studying, training, insisting, finishing what you started, is precisely what molded the strongest part of you. It was not the easy days that made you more capable. It was the days you did what was needed despite what you felt. The days your mind tried to negotiate, but you did not accept the deal. The days discipline spoke louder than doubt. You begin to recognize that the common life also requires effort, the effort of dealing with regrets, frustrations, lost opportunities, fabricated limitations, postponed dreams. The common life is expensive, perhaps even more costly than the extraordinary life, but only the extraordinary life returns your invested value with exponential interest. This is why so few cross this frontier, not because it is impossible, but because it demands paying a price many consider too high, until they realize the price of mediocrity is even higher. Discipline is the door separating these two worlds, and this door is never locked, but it is also never fully open. It demands that you push. It resists at first. The wood creaks, it feels heavy, but as you insist, the first inch is painful, the next is burdensome, but the movement continues. Until one day you look back and perceive something astonishing. The door has become light, and not because the world changed, but because you changed. The strength once required now resides within you. This is the point where you view the lives of extraordinary people with new eyes. You understand they are not different. They merely made different choices for long enough that those choices became character, identity, and destiny. Thomas Edison did not persist through 10,000 trials by chance. Henry Ford did not defy everyone and everything out of stubbornness. Andrew Carnegie did not erect empires by luck. All of them possessed a discipline the world deemed insane, and precisely because of this, they constructed results the world deemed impossible. Discipline will always seem excessive to those living without direction, but it is the secret weapon of those who refuse the misery of a half-lived life. The common life is comfortable but unsatisfying. The extraordinary life is challenging and, exactly for this reason, rewarding. In this contrast, you finally perceive that discipline does not take away freedom, it returns control to you. It only removes what never led to anything: procrastination, excuses, victimhood, self-deception, useless comparisons. It gives you focus, rhythm, clarity, strength, real results. And gradually, you realize there is no success without discipline, but you also perceive something even more powerful. There is no discipline without purpose, because no one sustains prolonged effort for something that makes no sense. Discipline is the child of purpose and the mother of results. And when these three align, purpose, discipline, result, you become unstoppable. Then another profound truth emerges, one Hill repeated for decades. Most people quit when they are one step from success. And why do they quit? Because upon reaching the most difficult point, the point where discipline is truly tested, they falsely believe this difficulty is a sign of failure. But it is not. It is exactly the opposite. Extreme difficulty is almost always an indicator that you have entered territory where the majority does not go. It is a sign you are close to where few arrive. The extraordinary territory has no signs, no maps, no guarantees. It has only one rule: continue. This is where many stop, but it is also where the great begin. The frontier between the common and the extraordinary can only be crossed by those who learn to continue even when nothing seems to happen, because the extraordinary does not happen overnight. It happens suddenly, after many days that seem identical. Discipline is the only bridge between the invisible and the inevitable, between intention and impact, between what you desire and what you finally live. And when you connect this within yourself, something giant awakens. You cease seeking motivation and begin seeking growth. You cease seeking speed and begin seeking constancy. You cease seeking approval and begin building a legacy. In this stage, life ceases to be a sequence of tasks and transforms into a masterpiece under construction. Every habit is a brick. Every conscious decision is a beam. Every conquered morning is another floor. And when you perceive it, the extraordinary structure is taking shape, not because you hurried, but because you did not stop.